This is Progress Culture. Progress Culture is a weekly happening where master drummer Paul F. Murphy and I share live improvised music and impromptu conversations with people from various fields and expertises about community, value, art, science, freedom, and progress for all. We are excited to share it all with you, so have a listen and see what's going on this week on Progress Culture. Now, let's get into the show. But first, let's hear some music. Everybody, here we are this week at the TechPort airplane hangar doing Progress Culture. I am Dominic Fragman here with Paul Murphy from Sonic Spirits, which includes poet Jere Carroll. And we are excited to be here today with Donna Jordan from Jordan R&D. How's it going?
Great.
Fresh off of a semester teaching dance at St. Mary's College.
Indeed.
Yeah, right on. Right. And we're excited to have, but also sad to see go, Tabitha Dunn, who's with Southern Maryland Loves You and is moving up the road.
Yeah, moving up. Still in Maryland, but
moving up. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
But this is not going to be her last show because she's going to be a guest anytime she likes to be.
Well, I appreciate the invite.
No problem. And I don't know if you can see, but her dog Amber has decided to keep me company today, which I'm very excited about. I don't know if she is or not, but okay. So a couple times back, a couple that you've been on the show a few times since this one particular episode where we talked about creativity, and I can't remember exactly how it was framed, but one of the things that you said that was really good was that creativity kind of shifts. Like there's things that one generation might think is creative that another generation wouldn't think is creative. Right. Which I think is very true. But at the same time, I wonder, how do we feel about, is there actual criteria for what creativity is?
Like a universal definition of sorts? Maybe
something that is essentially creativity, essential creativity or whatever. Like, is there something that there's I don't want to think of it necessarily as boxes that are checked, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah, like, is there something that you can use to help identify when you see something creative?
Right. I mean, I think that's more of a mindset and like using a certain part of your brain, because I feel like when you're being creative, it's like you get like a certain feeling, like you're like engaging a whole different part than if you're like, writing spreadsheets or whatever. Like it's like a whole other side of the brain where it's like you might be tired in one's perspective, but like when you're acting like creatively and you haven't been working that side of the brain, it's like a whole like separate thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hard to describe.
I feel like I want to question it, have questions for that, but I don't want to derail, because I'd like to hear how everybody feels about it. Yeah. But I wonder too, like, is it then for you when you think about that, like, oh, well, I'm tired on this side and I'm doing this kind of work, but then when I do this creative thing, is that something that that gets weaker if you don't use it? Like, is it a use it or lose it, or is it something?
I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's a use it or lose it. I think you do get like a rhythm in like that side of your brain, though. Like it takes a while to get back into it when you haven't been doing it. But I think it's like riding a bike, where it might take a second to get back into it, but then you're there. Like there's no relearning it, really. I don't know.
So then, would you say if there's a strengthening of it then?
Yeah, I think
there's not necessarily a losing of it, but there might be, it gets kind of dormant and you have to reawaken it.
Yeah.
And then it can be brought out more powerfully or stronger.
I think so. That's a good way of putting it.
Right on. I mean, I think it's an important part of, I guess, the question, like what is the criteria of this thing, right?
Well, I think Donna actually has a really good. I mean, when I think of like engaging the two sides, I think of Donna. Like she can speak to that so well, because I mean, you're doing your dance thing, and then you've got your financial like business side, and I've heard you talk about like how important it is to have both, and how equally you enjoy doing both.
I do, yes. And spreadsheets are fun. You can be creative.
I'm not saying they're fun. I'm just saying it's like a whole different side of the brain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Way to pass the baton. So I believe it just is. When you connect, when you connect with that creative part of yourself, or even watching other people, there's just like I don't know how to say it, but you go somewhere else. Yeah. I know Paul and I have discussed this before, but you're just like, not like, oh, but I mean, it could be. But for me, when you're in that space, it's not in this plane, because you feel like you're like connected to everything. It's like, and whatever art or love you like finances or dance or music or riding horses or playing tennis. You just elevate yourself. And it's very simple because it feels good.
Yeah.
Is that part of the... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say the creativity often seems like an accumulation of everything you've seen or heard or thought about. And while you're doing whatever you're doing, all of a sudden, sometimes out of nowhere, this thought or presence comes into your mind, and your mind has your body carry out what that thought was.
Like a creative spark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel.
So
Great. That's
when
how I
you
feel too.
when you are engaged in it, he's saying so. When you are we're talking now when you're engaged in creativity for yourself. Then is sort of where this is going. So, is there a criteria that you use to say, hey, I'm being creative, or this is more creative than the last time I felt like I was creative, or less creative than the last time? I mean, do you feel that? Is there a way that you can articulate that, or is it?
Well, I myself definitely feel that when it happens, that it's a difference in what was previously or in the past going on. I mean, it's almost like it comes out of nowhere. And when that happens, you are acting out what your mind has brought to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that interaction of your mind and yourself is, I believe, an interaction with all of the human beings and the universe, because we're all here. And if you brought something new, that's great. And if you just brought something very nice, that's very good too. It could be medical, it could be musical, it can be dance, it can be chemistry.
So I like this idea. I like of if you bring something new, that's fine. And if you bring something that's just nice, that's fine too, right? So these are all sort of can fall under the, if we call it an umbrella of creativity, right? So there's then is that to say that there is a spectrum of creativity?
I definitely would agree with that.
So not everything is going to fall in the same. I don't want to call it a hierarchy or anything, but it's a spectrum. So then it's all on the same level, on the same plane or whatever. It just happens to fall in this space in between,
Right.
not creativity and full out creativity. What's the difference?
I think time has a lot to do with the difference. I mean, if you look back at man looking at a bird in flight, and then that took some time before man was in flight. And now that man's in flight and going off the planet, that put man in flight a long time ago. It seems like, but it really wasn't that long ago.
Right.
It was just new to the person who invented it, who really didn't invent it.
Right.
He copied it and learned from something else, learned from a bird.
That's deep. That's
It
deep.
is. Taking a minute there.
that.
So then, is it possible to be creative in the sense of doing something new?
Is it doing something new, though, if you're looking at the bird and going, I want to fly like the bird does?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or I'm asking is like, if then this sort of falls under that idea that there's nothing new under the sun, right? Like that all
That's it.
these things are already occurring in some way in nature, and we are understanding, disclosing, extrapolating, whatever from these things. Is that the case? Is that how you feel?
I didn't feel that way, but now I'm starting to feel that way. It's making me think a whole new way.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I still think that, like Paul said, like you can still be creative without doing something new. So I don't think that changes anything on the creativity side.
Right.
So I don't know. And I think in more individual circumstances, like you can be creative more than on other days too. Like that goes back to that whole mental state thing where it's like you almost get into like a zone with that kind of creativity, and it's like sometimes you feel that zone, sometimes you don't really predict it, it just kind of happens.
Right. I agree wholeheartedly.
Do you think that zone can be strengthened?
Well, I think so. And I mean, when I was thinking and talking to you earlier about that that feeling of getting back into creativity and stuff like that, I was thinking about how when I'm using a more creative side of my brain, I find that zone faster and quicker. Whereas if I haven't been engaging that as much, it takes a while for me to get to that point again.
Mm-hmm. Is it something that you feel like you have any influence over the duration of the zone?
No, I think that's more of just like when I get in the zone, at least I get like very hyper focused on something, and like I'm task oriented and I'm moving towards that, whatever it is that I'm working on. And I think the duration of the zone is like needing to actually eat and drink and sleep at some point.
Well, yeah. And how about you? Do you have experiences with? Well, I know you have had experiences with a fluctuating interval of zone time.
That's correct.
Do you feel like you have any influence over the interval?
It depends on how much life gets in the way of my zone, because even when we try to embrace and connect with our creativity and our higher self, we still have to pay bills, and we still have to have a plan. I mean, I get in the zone, and I'm very grateful. I think that's a lot of that is setting yourself up, fueling your own destiny, if you will. I'm happy just hanging out with my kids playing board games, or Tabitha for that matter, who taught us another board game. But the main thing is when you're in that zone, I'm at my happiest. I'm like, everything I want is right in front of me. I'm not trying to be a trillionaire. My husband would love that. But I want the creature comforts that I want, and that allows for the zone. So I think you create your zones because you have to allow yourself time to get there, because we still have other stuff we don't want to do. I mean, everybody does.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with your husband on that. but I know that my wife, Jere, she's definitely more what you were talking about.
Yes.
Happiness.
Yes. That is priceless.
It is priceless.
Yes. And then you're happy being creative. You're happy what you want to create that makes you happy.
Right.
Right. And
that's something you can't touch.
You can't.
You can't see it.
Right.
But you can feel it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. For us, we always connect. Everything goes back to that feel.
Right.
That feel and that gut is like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Because that is, I guess, quantifiable. Only by us. Because we know what we feel.
Yeah.
And going back to that whole concept of duration of the zone or whatever, like you said, you had to take time for it, which I totally agree. You don't get to that zone if you don't take the time for it.
Yes.
But at the same time, you also can't give it a timeline. Like you can't be like, I'm going to be creative from noon to 1 today.
Yes.
Like that's the time I'm taking. Like,
right. Let me get my calendar. Let me get my schedule
Right.
out. No, it doesn't work like
No.
that. No, it does not.
No.
Because I think the whole creativity is in a place, not in this realm, right? Because you got to connect to something. And in that realm, there is no timeline.
Yeah.
There is no time. So you got to get it. You got to get in when you can fit in, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
you go after that. I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel. Yes.
Because there's been times where I've definitely I've taken conscious time to be creative and just to connect with that. And there's times when I will spend, half a day and maybe have an hour worth of creativity at most. And there'll be other times when I'll take 2 hours and I'll be in the zone that entire 2 hours. And you have no
Wow.
idea what makes a difference. At least for me, I'm not sure.
Yes, you're the perfect candidate for Dominic's questions because you know what I'm saying, because you've, with our experience, But quantifying creativity, I don't know if I've ever thought about that. That's why you ask these questions.
Do you think it's necessary?
Which, to quantify
Yeah.
creativity? For me?
Mm-hmm. Or we can only talk for
That is true. I can't talk for anybody. I've never thought of it. I don't know if it's necessary, or I just know I want to be in that zone, and because I don't know if I've ever thought about, am I more creative? Yes, I am sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that is, because if I had a big show and I have to choreograph 3 numbers, you darn skippy, I got to quantify that because I have to produce something. But that's not fun.
Right.
It's not
That's
fun.
work.
That's work.
Well,
That's hurting that in that aspect, quantifying the creativity, not good for me. But if I'm just in a moment, that's different.
But what about if we take some of this, boil down some of what we've said about what creativity might be when we're doing it ourselves, right? Not to say what it is when we experience it from somebody else,
Yes.
but for when we're doing it for ourselves, if we're saying that this creativity is like love and happiness, right? So is that something that you feel inclined to increase in your life?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so if you have the inclination to increase that, do you have an inclination to be aware of when you've increased you have an increase in your creativity for whatever reason?
Well, looking at it like
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just thinking about that. To be aware of it more. I mean, I think being aware of it is kind of just a byproduct. Like if I've just been really creative for a long time and I'm feeling better, I'm just I'm aware that I've been more creative, but I don't know that it's
But not more creative necessarily for the duration, right? Which we just talked about, a duration. So a longer creative period, but let's say a more potent creative period where you
Okay.
feel like what you have engaged in is, I don't want to say it like this, but I will, at a higher level than what you were before, or had, or maybe not before altogether, but then the couple times prior or whatever. And that feels like maybe a breakthrough, and maybe you'll be possibly able to maintain that level of creativity and potency. So when you jump back in the next time, you try to start from that level of creativity. Is there a reason to start from that level of creativity? And if creativity is a happiness and love, and you want to increase happiness and love, can you do, if that's what the creativity is? I guess I'm just starting to repeat myself here, but you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but can you quantify love?
And the level of love. I mean, I think there are levels of love and levels of happiness and levels of creativity.
Yeah, there may be levels of it, but I mean, to quantify, nobody, say 2,000 years ago, was thinking about quantifying anything.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're here and talking about quantifying, and they're going to have the quantum computers. So that's another direction that everyone is going to be at least looking at or becoming part of.
When we say quantify, is it not, can we have a definition of quantification that isn't necessarily to like a metric, right? It's just like what you feel. Still, right? Because it's all about what we feel. So if it's still what we feel, does that feeling change or feel more beneficial if it were more this or that?
Well, what do you feel when you play music?
Well,
What do you feel there? I mean, I won't ask you what you feel. When I play, I feel very connected to something besides myself, but I also feel and I also know when I don't think what I'm playing is really where I should be, so I change it, or I don't change it and go, I'm just going to go this way and see what happens with the other pieces that are playing with me. And if it changes them or doesn't change them, or does that interaction create something that gets created and realized by more than just myself.
Those are highly variable too, because that could change from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, like what
Yeah.
feels the best and what seems like it fits and everything like that. And I think when you were saying like when you reach a higher level of creativity or whatever, can you jump back to that at some point? I tend to think the answer is no, because that higher level of creativity might have fit and felt good in that moment, but it may not fit the same way later on in a different moment.
all right. Let me ask you this. Is creativity a craft? Like a skill, like a craft? Like
I don't know. I mean, you're building it, so I guess in that way you build skills and crafts. And
if creativity is like a craft or a skill, don't we not have the ability to increase our skills?
yeah, you do.
And
I think
improve
you
our
can
crafts?
Improve creativity and your connection with it. And I think that goes back to if you do it more, you're able to reach that connection quicker and faster for longer. And
Right.
yeah.
Just like the first time you got on a horse, you probably couldn't control it very well. You
Right.
probably couldn't execute certain things that you're executing now.
But each time you get on, you're able to get there faster and do those things that you do.
You don't start at the beginning every time.
Yeah.
Of the beginning of the beginning. You start at the beginning that you're at now.
But at the same way, like, just because I was able to execute something last week and it went really well doesn't
Sure.
necessarily mean I'll be able to get on and do it exactly that way this time just because I did it once before.
Yes, I have many experiences with that where I'm like, wow, look at this stuff I can do now, and then I'm like, I can't do it at all anymore. And I what I've come to understand those periods as is I've got a flash of where I need to go to. It's often how it comes to me framed now. So I'll do it and I'll be playing something for 2 hours straight. And I'll be like, look at this stuff, I'm doing all these things, and now I understand on a totally different level how did I never see this before? And then, of course I haven't. I've been doing it for 2 hours. And the next day you come back and it's like, I don't even know where to begin to get to that. But I now know that it exists. And I now know that if I put the time into that, I'll gain a little bit more ability to assimilate it.
Right.
Not control it or any of that, but to sort of get to that space and go on that ride more fluidly in my thing. And I guess that sort of touches on what you asked me, like, well, how do you feel when you play?
Right.
And I think in addition to the tremendous focus and that state of connection and sort of the ability to go on the ride is also I have the ability to be aware that not only necessarily is today I'm executing better and I feel good about it, but this is going somewhere that's stronger, more advanced than where I was. Is that something that happens to you?
I think so. And I mean, going back to that building and stuff like that, once you've reached it once, you may not necessarily be able to repeat it again just like that right away, but you know it exists then, like you said, and you can take the time, and maybe at some point you do get to the point where you can execute it almost all the time, and then you're striving for something even higher beyond that maybe you haven't been able to get to doing all the time yet. No.
What does that happen to you?
Oh, heck yes. All the time. With the finances, accounting is very, I guess, with the left brain, so you learn, do, and then you get better and better. You're like, crap, I really thought I knew this stuff, but I didn't. So you just learn more and more, and you get better. And you can't achieve it, I feel, what the traditional, what we call left brain. The creativity comes in when you understand it on that side, and you're like, ooh, how can I make it better? How can I help save them money? What other research can I do? That's the creative part of financing. Now it's the people element. It's not just like little numbers running around.
Right.
And in the dance, I have the exact same thing, because I'm like, ooh, let me try Argentine tango, and I'll drag my husband kicking and screaming, and then we'll go somewhere, and I think I have it. I'm like, oh, yes, because in my mind, oh, I can do all dances. And then my husband will say, you feel like I'm moving around a brick. And I'm like, oh, so I have not achieved what I thought I achieved. Then guess what? I learn more, and I learn more, and then it gets better. He actually said that. Wasn't that mean? That was just mean. But anyway, just killed my little pride. But then I knew.
We're going to have to get Brian a mic next time. We can start your rebuttal.
You know, it's
We need
just
another
a little,
voice from beyond.
The rebuttal from beyond.
from beyond. Yes, but that was when you think you know something, then you actually apply it. Maybe I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And then that's the challenge and the journey. Just get back up there on that horse and just try it again, and you get better. Like you said, that creativity, you go to a higher level that it feels, once again, it feels good. And you know when everything is all in place, because that's the personification of what you're here anyway.
Yes.
It's a very tricky conversation, though, right? Because, like, now we are talking, and maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you there. I don't know. But, I mean, I think about these things, and then I go and I wonder, like, okay, well, if this spectrum of creativity is just nothing to hear, and it's all good because it's all happiness and love, well, then what's that higher level stuff? You know, when you feel that higher level of it, what is that? Is it actually higher? Does it matter?
I think it's that spark of creativity that we talked about before. It's that you're already engaged in creativity, but then you get that spark, and you're like in that zone, and you're reaching something that you hadn't before.
Is it fine to think of it as higher level?
I mean, like, in the way that you're diminishing other creativity.
Well, no, you wouldn't want to do that necessarily, right? Like, is there a reason to do that?
I don't want to diminish other creativity. I think that's why I was saying, like, I wouldn't call it a higher level in a demeaning way to other creativity, but like...
Well, let me ask you this. If we shan't diminish, is there anything about a higher level creativity that will help people, or not people, or anything, to bring things into a new level of understanding. Does creativity do that for other people?
I think so. I mean, we've kind of been dancing around the topic of like creativity being an engagement with other people too, not just within yourself. Like,
does higher levels of creativity have the ability to bring people further along?
Yeah. I mean, that whole concept of looking at the bird and wondering,
Right.
can I fly too, like that? I mean, that's advancement and innovation. And
That's right.
Is there, so then here in this part of the conversation, do we find more value in the higher level of creativity that has the ability to bring people, advance their understandings and of the universe further? Is that something that we put beyond, like, do we need to identify that as something that can go beyond the creativity that isn't as advanced as that, but provides the happiness and love? I mean,
Well, I think we need to look at creativity in itself. In other words, like, all of us can sit here and speak and talk about all types of advancements that have happened. But we're still on this one little planet in one small solar system where there's millions of other solar systems, millions of other galaxies. And I believe that for us to think that we are the highest level that's been attained throughout the entire universe, I think that in itself leads certain people among us to be very creative and innovate along with create and show us positive and new direction. Now, that necessarily doesn't mean, though, that because we all live under a controlling force that's here on the earth itself, that doesn't mean that that controlling force is the leading edge, because that controlling force is using what has been given to them as well.
What people do create.
Right. I mean, just like what's happening on the world today. I mean, yes, some of us have got vaccinated. I have. I think everybody here has. Some of us are not being vaccinated. And yet, then again, there's certain places in the world where a whole lot of people are dying, and the vaccines are not there. Well, why not? If we all enjoy love and happiness, then we all should be focused on the goal of bringing humanity forward, not controlling it to make money.
Yeah.
Creativity.
I have a comment.
Please.
As far as creativity, it's wonderful to have so much high levels and going to these things, but I feel that everything depends on the person. If they're not willing to accept or open up or find space to bring that in, it doesn't matter how high level of creativity that can be shown to them. Because it's back to Tabitha, it's the mindset. If you're living your most authentic life, that means you know what makes you happy. So it's gonna all come to you. If you don't, then it's not. We can't like cram it in you. I mean, it's just not gonna happen. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think that we're individuals who can connect and can have so many different possibilities.
Right.
But maybe you have a life where you're part of a domestic abuse. Who knows? Do you think they're gonna be in a space that they can be like, oh, let me just really embrace. They're going to be in a prison. And then you can talk all day long and try to explain to them what might be happening so that they can live, because that's not authentic life if you're suffering, because we're supposed to be in abundance. I mean, if you're a biblical person, we're supposed to live a life of abundance involving creativity, innovation, history, connection, all of that. So that's what I always think about just from a social standpoint when I connect with people all the time. Why would you choose that? You know?
One from a scientific perspective, like in like psychology and whatnot, you have like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and stuff like that. You can't engage with creativity and self-fulfillment if your basic needs aren't met. That's a little bit of life getting in the way as well. Like you have to have your physical needs met before you can engage with that.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Oh, God darn, I don't know where to go from there.
You had a comment?
I don't know what I was going to say anymore. I mean, not that I don't have things to say about what we're talking about, but as far as like, it's time to wrap it up, and this just went to another place.
Oh my goodness!
No, it's totally cool, but okay. I think that I don't know what to say about helping people to get through that, to have their needs met. And maybe and so we've spent this time talking about creativity for ourselves, but then the experience of the other people's, maybe we'll just frame it as love and happiness, that would help to align somebody with or encourage them and show them a pathway, right, to expand what they can perceive. If you are in a situation that you feel like you can't get out of, and you can't get out of, you're in a physical domestic abuse or thing, or poverty and these things, it's not like I'm going to say being a positive person and experiencing is going to help you to get out of that. But I do think that love and happiness will, because the part of that love and happiness can take that person and give them food and shelter and safety and provide that. So in the same way, I guess that doing a spreadsheet would be creative. That would be creative, create a way to do that for somebody.
Right. That's exactly right.
I think to me, that's sort of what creativity, where I think of creativity the most, is this expanding what can be perceived, expanding what can be conceived. And not that the things that generate love and happiness and don't do that don't have any value or anything, but in order to sort of come to this position where we can understand that there are people in the world who are not living in that condition, and that there are millions of other universes and things, this is going to take creative ideas and practice to help show and disclose and really help people to see, feel, engage, and live those kinds of lives, I think. So I don't know if that's a good wrap up, but I think that it's true. So, and I think that I'd be I would love to hear the conversation that we could have around the experience of other people's when we experience what somebody else is doing as a creative thing, and how do we have that spectrum? Do we have that? Does this strike at us and we go, "This is so hum"? Or do we see it and we're like, this is truly amazing, and I know that there are things that I am going to be interested in, find truly amazing, are going to be very different, or maybe not, but there has certainly more possibility that they're going to be different from person to person than this idea of a universal criteria. Mm-hmm. I think the universal criteria, if there were one, is your universe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but I still really appreciate and value hearing what that is, and merging the universes. So, let's do that. Let's merge more universes. So, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being here. I wish you nothing but the greatest and the best, and I hope that I see you and Amber very often.
I hope that happens as well.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. ProgressCulture.org, sonic-spirits.com, and thank you to Southern Maryland Loves You for hooking us up and taking care of us. And again, they love you. We love them. Get on board. So, see you next time. Thanks. Thank you all so much for being with us. We appreciate you sharing your time and consideration. Please feel free to reach out to Sonic Spirits of Progress Culture at sonic-spirits.com and progressculture.org. You can also connect with us through our sponsors at techportsomd.org and somdlovesyou.org. We'd love to hear from you if you're working on something awesome, or you have ideas for future shows, or you just like to say hello. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Much love. See you soon.